This episode is brought to you by HR Easily. This isn't exactly an ad, it's a fact. Tech in Asia uses HR Easily and they help us pay our staff on time so we can do things like make this podcast. Check them out at hreasily.com. Hello and welcome to Startup Snapshot, a Tech in Asia podcast. We're talking to the leaders among innovators in the Asian startup scene about their founder journeys, their highest and lowest moments, and how they've overcome the challenges they've faced along the way. My name's Nat, and with me on today's episode is Amrit Kumar, co-founder of public blockchain platform Zilliqa. Welcome to the podcast, Amrit.
Hello, Nat. Thank you very much, and hello to all the listeners.
Now, I know very little about blockchain technology, so bear that in mind when you explain this. But what exactly is Zilliqa?
Yes. So the context comes back again around problems that blockchains face. Mm-hmm. So if you look at popular blockchain providers like platforms like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they process around 5 to 10 transactions or maximum of 20 transactions per second.
Right.
In terms of throughput. So when, let's say, if the throughput is, let's say, 10 transactions per second, and if you have 11th person sending the same transaction in the same second, then the 11th transaction has to wait until the first 10 have been processed. So the throughput is very limited. If you compare it with, let's say, a real-world application such as payment service providers like Visa, they process around, at least on average, around 10,000 transactions per second on average.
Okay, so that's a lot more than what blockchain can do.
There's a huge gap between what a simple application like payment requires in real world and what blockchains provide in terms of throughput. So this was a problem that my professor under whom I was working, Pratik Saxena, he was working on this as well,
right,
trying to understand how we can solve this problem. And he found a solution that's called sharding.
Right. Okay.
And so and the idea was that if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, when you send a transaction to the Bitcoin or Ethereum network, which can consist of, let's say, 10,000 nodes, mm-hmm, then each transaction gets processed by each one of those 10,000 nodes, gets validated. So they check whether your transaction is valid, they check whether you are trying to double spend or not, and so on. And so it's very decentralized, very secure. So even if few nodes go down, you can make sure that your transaction will indeed go through and the network will not process any fraudulent transaction. So the idea was to kind of solve this problem by changing the model in which transactions get processed, basically.
Okay, so sharding basically divides up the work of what miners would do.
That's right.
Splitting it, so maybe if there's like 10 amount of work to be done, you split into 10 shards, and then each shard only requires one amount of work to be done. Right. Okay. So what were actually some of the challenges that you faced, you and your co-founders faced in the early days of Zilliqa?
So as any startup, and I think this is nothing new for Zilliqa, as any startup, when you start, you probably have a team of 5 to 6 people to start with. If you're lucky, you have a 6 to 7 member team. But normally it starts from 2 and then it starts to grow. Luckily for us, it was around 5 to 7 member team.
Oh, from the get-go, it was 5 to 7. From the get-go. Okay.
And they were all co-founders with different expertise. So we had at least 4 people who had PhDs in computer science. And the reason was that it was a very technology-driven platform. You had to build, understand the research space,
sure,
how sharding was proposed in the academic literature. And then you also have to understand that there's a gap between what's there in theory and when you bring it down to practice, things change a lot.
Right.
So we definitely needed people with expertise in that space. So anyway, we started with this 7-member team, but even then there was a lot of work. You had to write the white paper, design document that would say, okay, here is how the architecture would look like, and here is what we plan to implement. Second one, you had to bring funding. So you have to make sure that we have initial funding to be able to survive for the next few months while we were writing even the white paper. Mm-hmm. And longer term funding for sure. And then you also have to build the community, because blockchain doesn't exist without a community, and you need all sorts of community in blockchain. You need people who buy your vision, who understand what you're trying to chase. At the same time, you need people who can mine on your platform, because most blockchains are mined. By mining, it's basically about running those nodes,
right,
in simple terms.
Right.
So you need to be able to find people and convince them that this is a platform that provides you the right incentive to mine, and you have to build that community. And then you also need all sorts of enthusiasts around the whole space. So community building is also something that we had to handle, and I was in fact the one who was trying to channel people and make sure that
building that community.
Building the community, making sure that people buy the vision that we are selling.
Right.
And it's also about and also the problem that I faced at that point of time is about bringing the language down, because when we started, we had this very tech-driven language, very techy lingo, and sometimes it's very difficult for people to kind of understand that language.
Right, especially because that was the time when blockchain wasn't as well known as it is now.
Well, yes and no, because at that point of time, yes, there were platforms like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but other ones were basically applications.
Right.
Other platforms were not existent yet. So and Zilliqa was the only one at that point of time which was pursuing this idea of sharding, which was also very new. So blockchains were not that, they're still pretty new, but on top of that, the technology that we were trying to implement was also pretty new. And so it was also for us a responsibility and challenge for us to kind of tone it down to a level where people can understand the vision.
Right, to make it easier to get people on board.
Exactly.
To get people to understand what you guys were doing.
Yes.
Okay, and I understand that year the industry saw a significant bull run, which is where the value of several tokens, several assets across different blockchains all rise exponentially. How did that affect how you guys were building Zilliqa?
Well, so we started writing the white paper in June 2017. So at that point of time, the general market was pretty good. But by the time we were kind of looking into TGG, things were starting to become a bit shady.
Okay, right.
And dark.
How exactly was it getting a little shady?
Shady in the sense that it was the market was not very was going into this bear and crypto winter.
Oh, okay. So the opposite of a bull run. It's going into the bear run.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was going into that dark phase where people were starting to think, oh, okay, there were a lot of, and actually at that point of time, the number of platforms were not many, or even people were building platforms, there were not many. There was a platform like EOS, for instance, or Tezos was trying to do things at that point of time. But most of the activities that you were seeing was around applications. But there are not too many platforms.
Right.
And I would say Zilliqa was probably one of the very few who were proposing at that point of time. So for us, while we were doing this TGE, the market started to recover. By the time we really wanted, so we were lucky in that sense.
Sure.
The market was starting to recover in the end, and we were able to successfully, raise what we wanted to.
Okay. Right. So. About a year after you guys wrote the white paper, less than a year after you wrote the white paper, Zilliqa actually burst the market cap value of $1 billion US. So you guys hit $1 billion market cap within a year. How exactly did that happen?
Well, okay.
Especially because you mentioned, there was a downturn, it was a bear market. How did you get to that $1 billion valuation?
Yes. So okay. This is my personal perspective on it. I personally feel that coin market cap is probably not the right metric to measure things. Having said that, it's always nice to see you being placed in a unicorn level, which is really nice.
Right, because when for a blockchain company, hitting a $1 billion market cap is the same as a startup hitting unicorn status.
Yes, exactly. Right. So
okay.
it was a really good feeling, honestly, and it also meant for us that the community was buying into our vision. They believed in what we were doing, not just on the tech side, but also on the business side. The community felt that this platform is not just about technology, but also about some of the business use cases that we're chasing. So I would say that yes, the market became very favorable to us at that point of time, and we're glad that it happened.
Right. Okay. So what was the general reaction of the office at the time when you guys realized you hit $1 billion?
Well, I
mean,
can't,
I know you are not super psyched about it, but what was the general?
I don't think we opened champagne bottles, but I think yes, it was a good feeling, and we really felt that what we were doing was being accepted by the community, and that was the best feeling because you work hard for people to buy your vision, and when they do, I mean there are many different ways in which you could see whether people are trying to get into your vision or they are trying to come into your narrative. One is, of course, when you have a conversation with people on your channels. They ask you questions, they give you feedback on what you're doing. They tell you, okay, maybe yes, you're doing right, but maybe you could also do this. How about doing this? And in fact, many of the design decisions that we made later on on our technology stack also came from some of the feedback that we got, which also shows that some community was engaged with us, and that also is a good feeling about it. So that's one way of measuring, whether people are buying into your vision and ideas. And at the same time, when you look at the market as well, when market shows those trends like, coin market cap or ranking, it also gives you a good feeling that even the market is believing in your tech and vision, business vision.
Okay, so with this increased interactivity with your community, with more feedback coming in, what kind of developments did this spur at Zilliqa at the time?
So I still remember the first time. So there's this tradition of doing AMAs, so which is basically ask me anything.
Right.
So there's this tradition of doing AMAs in the blockchain industry. I still remember the first time when we did an AMA. Some committee member told us that, oh, why are you doing AMA when you are here to answer every single question every minute? So what's the point of that? Because AMA is generally is done when the core team is not available at a regular basis. So let's say if you have a question, then what generally happens is core team is busy with many different things like business and building and writing code.
Right, because you can't just have 24 hours spent answering questions.
Exactly. But we always felt that a community was important. And so I personally was responsible to building that community at the beginning.
Right.
And I was being told. I was at least told by some committee members that, okay, what's the point of this AMA? The first AMA, actually. Because I was almost always there to answer every single question that they had.
Right.
And in fact, it was very, very productive. And we saw very interesting questions coming up. And at the same time, I also got to learn about other projects. So I still remember people asking us questions on, okay, how do you compare yourself with this project? How do you compare yourself with other project? And in fact, it's not just about saying that, oh, we are doing different things. But for me, it was a question where I also wanted to understand what exactly my competitors were doing. So I literally read at least 40 white papers during my conversation with the community for around 6 months.
Wow. Okay.
And some people may say it was a waste of time, but I don't consider it as a waste of time because it gave me a good idea of what other people were doing, and if you could borrow ideas from other projects. And in fact, we did. There were some projects who were implementing certain things, and I personally felt that they were good ideas, and there's no shame in implementing some of those things, and as long as you acknowledge them that this is something that we borrowed from you and it's really nice. Thank you very much.
Of course, because especially in a space like the blockchain industry that's so nascent, learning from the general players within that space is very important to bring the technology further.
Yes,
right?
And I think and the point is, since it's a completely open source project, you have to learn from other people, and people will learn from you as well.
Right.
And it should be in that way. I mean, people do talk about competition, but I believe that it's also about many projects right now are trying to solve the scalability problem. Even now, for instance, when we started, there was only one sharding project, which was Zilliqa. But now, if you look around, there are at least 10 or 15 projects that are doing the same thing. I'm saying thing by me that they're trying to solve the same problem, but their approaches could be different.
Right, using different methods, different strategies.
Methods. And this is the beauty of open source, where you get inspired from what people are doing. You may be trying to solve the same problem, but yet you'll be able to come up with creative ideas by learning from other people.
Right.
So coming back to your question, which is, what was community reaction and what happened, in terms of our communication with the community, I don't think it changed that much. We were active since day one, and we were still active even today. I often spend time with talking with the community and answer questions whenever people tag me.
Right. Okay. So I guess this hitting 1 billion, it did get you to read a lot of white papers within that 6 months.
Yes.
It increased your engagement with the community. But then we saw that just recently, actually, the current market cap for Zilliqa is actually approaching 60 million USD, currently 62 million. How did this happen after hitting $1 billion, now dropping to $60 million?
Yeah. Okay. So as I said, I personally don't believe in market cap, but I do believe in ranking.
Right.
Numbers, they go up and down. Because it all depends on the market. You cannot do much. And in fact, this market, if I'm not harsh to people who are listening, this market to some extent is also sort of immature.
Sure.
There's a lot to be learned. People are still very new. They don't understand the technology. And it's always very hard to understand the technology as well. So imagine yourself not being a computer scientist or someone who is not a techie, not a developer. Even one single lingo that you put in, that you can put in front of people, it puts you off. You don't understand. I mean, you don't understand, things become very complicated.
Right. It's like the internet in the 90s.
Yes.
It's 10 years on, but people still didn't have a grasp of social media, how exactly you could use the internet.
Yeah.
So do you attribute that as one of the reasons why the market cap dropped?
There are many different reasons.
Okay.
But I do feel that, as you mentioned about internet, I also feel that blockchains have to go behind the scenes.
Right.
What I mean by behind the scenes is that people should not be forced to learn about sharding. People should not be forced, at least maybe developers should be forced, but general people like you and me who are simple users of a blockchain platform, they should not be forced to learn how sharding works and what's BFT and what's consensus protocol. They should be able to use a platform, use an application that's sitting on a blockchain that's behind the scenes. However, unfortunately, we are in a stage where everyone has to feel the brunt of technology and has to kind of face that heat. But also, I also feel that there's this community is still this market is still kind of immature. But I'm not saying that it's because of them that the market cap has gone down. But there are a lot of other factors as well,
right?
Including some of the things that we could have done better.
Okay, and what were some of these things?
For instance, we felt that while we were still engaged with the community, we were still very tech-driven, in the sense that when you're building a blockchain platform with sharding, which is a very new technology, a cutting edge, which no one has tried before,
right?
You are bound to face obstacles. You're bound to face challenges. Some of the challenges are open problems, so no one knows the solution to those problems. You cannot just refer to a textbook, look on Google and find an answer and then copy paste. You just can't do that because there's just no solution out there.
Right.
Which also meant that we kind of stayed, a big focus of the team stayed on the tech. And the engagement with the community kind of started to lose to some extent. We were not also loud enough to talk about our achievements. One also because we are kind of coming from the academic community, it's an academic sphere. We tend to show off only when we have things to show off.
Right, when you have something concrete to show.
Exactly.
Okay.
So while we are showing things here and there, but we also felt that we're a bit conservative compared to what this market is used to, which is tell us every other day what you're up to.
Right, celebrating the little things.
Exactly, celebrating the little things. Unfortunately, that was something that I feel in hindsight we could have done better. Being loud about what we're doing, there's no shame about that. And it's not about, even if you face challenges, it's about speaking about it. You said, look, here is the problem that we're trying to solve. Here is the challenge that we are facing, and here is something that we're trying to see if it works. It will work.
Right.
But it has to be kind of toned down to a level which normal people can understand. So I felt that yes, there was some, in hindsight, we could have done things better, done things in a different way. But again, it's hard to predict whether things would have changed.
Right.
things would have really gone the way we would have wanted.
Sure, you can't go back and change.
Yeah,
you, you don't know what would happen.
Yeah, but I do agree that we have slipped a little bit on the ranking, but I think it's instead of focusing too much on that, if you keep on building tech, if you keep on bringing adoption, if you keep on bringing businesses that can build on Zilliqa, I think the community will again realize the potential that we have and what we can offer, and then we can see ourselves back up.
Right. Okay. So you're not entirely worried about this, but you do attribute it to, well, a couple of factors. One being, it's still a very young market. Not all the users, not all the developers fully understand all that's going on with the technology. Plus, on Zilliqa's end, you weren't doing enough to engage about your successes.
Right.
So that kind of dulled, I guess, the confidence that the community had.
I agree. It had an impact.
Right. Okay. So what were some of the lessons, I guess, aside from better engagement with the community, that you took away from this drop in the market cap?
Yeah, so remember I told you about the AMA, the first AMA that we did.
Yes.
Which was, people were saying, why are you doing it? And a few months later, around 6 months later, people were indeed asking for AMAs.
Oh, okay.
So
were these the same people that asked why you were doing AMAs?
I don't know if they're the same people, but definitely someone was asking for it.
Okay.
Which also meant that our engagement, and I'm being very frank and honest here with the listeners, which also means that we were not, being communicative enough. In an open way.
Sure.
And I would like to see, and this is the agenda for my our marketing and communication team, which is I personally, as someone leading the team, I want to go back at that point where people should not be asking for AMAs.
Right.
Where people get updates on a regular basis, and they should, if they have any questions, they should ping us and be able to get a reply that could answer their questions. And so my motto is go back to a state where people don't have to ask for AMAs, and you should be proactive enough to make sure that the community has enough information to that they want.
Right. Okay. So moving forward, what does this I would still say it's a very significant drop in market cap, though it doesn't worry you, though you would say it doesn't really hold as much a basis for anything to be worried about. What does this actually mean for Zilliqa moving forward?
Okay, so when I say that it doesn't mean too much, but as I said, I do understand the importance of ranking. I also understand some of the community members who may have invested in Zilliqa, and the drop in ranking also may give a bad feeling to them, and they may feel panicked. But I feel that even for them, I would like to reassure them that going up and down, it happens in everybody's life, and Zilliqa is no exception. But as long as you can keep on working on it, people will realize that there's a potential there. Coming back to your question, which was around,
what does this mean for Zilliqa moving forward?
Yes, so for us, we do want to be pulled back. We do want to see ourselves in the top ranking, because I personally feel, and I feel many of the community members would agree with me, which is we deserve to be on top. It's not like we have not delivered. In fact, we were the very first blockchain platform to drive sharding, and we have inspired many other projects to follow the same path, which is following sharding. We are working on different businesses that could bring adoption to Zilliqa, and we also feel that we have tons of things to do in the roadmap as well that can change things. So for us, it's about yes, going up in the ranking, but because we deserve, we know that our capabilities, and I think committee members will also agree with me that we don't deserve this place.
Right. Okay. You mentioned actually that for some of the community members who invested in Zilliqa, it might be some cause for worry for them to see the market cap drop so low, to see the valuation drop so low. Were there any criticisms from within the community during this time when the market cap dropped?
Well, yes, definitely, and you could see it from different angles. And it's human emotion, right? People do get worried about projects that they like, and if they see that things are not going well with them, and it's just for us. It's the same for us. They are equally valuable to me personally compared to, let's say, the Zilliqa team members. They're equally valuable to me. So yes, of course, there were concerns around the drop in market cap ranking. But I also feel that as long as the community is with you, things can quickly change.
Right.
And it's all about making sure that the community is informed of what we're doing or what our plans are in terms of both tech and business plans. And there are many initiatives that we're taking, and we have taken as well. Up until now, unfortunately, many of these were, since we are preparing for the license, there's unfortunately not much that we can share. But once we have the appropriate license, we can go and, on the roof and shout about what we have achieved.
Right.
So there's certain things that will change, but unfortunately it will take a bit of time. But as long as the community with us, it should not be a big problem.
Okay. So, well, I'm sure our newsroom would be very happy to hear about the upcoming stuff that you can shout from the roofs. But thank you so much for sharing your story, Amrit. Now we're going to move on to some of our listeners' questions.
Sure.
Because a while ago, we posted an Instagram story on the Tech in Asia Instagram asking our listeners, you guys, what you wanted to know about Zilliqa. So now with you in the studio, Amrit, I think it'll be good to go through some of the questions.
I hope they're not tough ones.
Oh, no. They're very good questions. So first one, we have one from Dtron TELJ. Where do you see Zilliqa in 2 years in terms of market cap rank?
Okay, so I cannot predict where we can go, but what I would like to see is, and I think we deserve it. We have to be there. We ought to be there. Is in top 20.
Top 20.
I feel we can be there if we can convince the community to be with us.
Right. Okay. And how confident are you that Zilliqa can reach that in 2 years?
Okay. So I would say that I'm around 80% confident on this. But again, it cannot happen unless we get the right support from the community. No matter how hard you try, because there's a funny saying in the crypto world that people in the blockchain space, some of them they come for tech. Some of them, they come for money, and the others come for the drama.
Right.
So,
come for the drama, really.
So I'd say, jokes aside, I do feel that there's support that we need from the community as well.
Right.
And without that, it's not going to move forward.
Okay, so 80% confident. Hopefully we'll see that happen in 2 years. The last two questions that we have, both concerning the same thing, from Miss Alex Sheehan. What are some of the upcoming partnerships? And from Antoine Sija, we would love to know more about the Chainlink partnership.
Yes, so for the upcoming partnership, unfortunately, we don't make an announcement of an announcement.
Right.
If we have partnerships that will come, new partnership, if they come in the future, we will love to share them, but at the right time. Unfortunately, I cannot share it at this stage.
Oh, no worries.
For Chainlink specifically, the idea behind Chainlink is to provide an Oracle service. Now you can imagine such a service, Oracle service is very, very useful for many applications. One could be, for instance, price feed. Imagine yourself building a DEX or something of that kind. Imagine yourself, trying to sell something, a digital asset.
Okay.
That depends on a price, and that price has to come from the external physical world. In that case, you need an Oracle, and Chainlink is something that will provide a gateway to that external interface for Zilliqa.
Right. So it combines the blockchain values with the external values in the real world,
right?
To provide some sort of correspondence between the two spaces. Okay. Well, what stage are you guys at with this Chainlink partnership?
So we have already built, the Chainlink has already built one adapter that people can use.
Right.
But there are multiple phases in which we are going to improve on that adapter.
Okay, so what can people, are you able to tell us what people can expect from this partnership?
Right now, not so much. But yeah, the end goal is basically to provide a layer that any application developer can use. So basically hook up your APIs and use and get hooked up with APIs on the Chainlink side and be able to use their data feeds, basically. So that's going to be the end goal.
Yeah. Thank you for answering all the questions.
Thank you very much.
That's all the time that we have for today's episode, unfortunately.
Sure.
But thank you so much again for joining me.
Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you and your listeners.
And if all of our listeners want to learn more about Zilliqa, you can visit the Zilliqa website at zilliqa.com. That's zilliqa.com. Or you can follow the company's Twitter at Zilliqa, at Zilliqa. If you want to learn more news from Zilliqa, since Amrit wasn't able to share so much, I guess you can go to the Medium page. Do you guys use
so
Medium?
we have a blog post, but we are trying to move that blog post on the web page itself. So it's going to be in-house kind of blog post. But if you want to follow updates, a quick way would be to either join our Telegram channel, which is you search for Zilliqa Chat, which is the name of the channel, or you could follow simply us on Twitter.
Right.
And you can get updates very quickly on that.
Right. So anyone interested about the partnerships, interested in more information, who want to look forward to these announcements, you can follow Zilliqa on Twitter, or you can join the Zilliqa Telegram channel.
That's right.
Until our next episode, that's the podcast. Thank you to all our listeners for listening, and thanks again to Amrit for sharing.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Your
Thank
story.
you.
If you like what you hear, subscribe to us wherever you're listening from. We're uploading episodes every other week, and we've got a great lineup of guests whose stories I'm very excited to share with all of you. All our episodes are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. You can also find episodes on the Tech in Asia webpage at techinasia.com/startup-snapshot. Also, we'd love to hear from you. You can drop us an email at podcast@techinasia.com to let us know what you thought of this episode, or if you just want to say hi. Thanks again for tuning in to Startup Snapshot. My name's Nat. Goodbye.